Yeah, this video is about map design, and it's going to cover some concepts that I haven't seen in tank games such as World of Tanks, some things that I propose should be added. I'm going to start with the design of cities and towns. Now, the concept of this video is that you choose which tank you're going to play when you get into the game. And you could have a light tank, a medium tank, heavy tank, SPG, tank destroyer. And the tanks have different characteristics. Light tanks tend to be small. For example, the ELC is a very small tank. And then you've got large tanks such as the Type 5 Heavy. And the TOG is another example of a rather large tank, in this case a long tank. And these different characteristics can be, excuse me, can benefit you in the game. However, the maps have to be designed in such a way to allow you to take advantage of that. I'm going to use the example of this part of the city. You'll notice that here we have a pathway that goes between these buildings, and we've got this road over here and this road over here. Now, this road is designed to be wide enough that any tank can drive on it, including a Type 5 Heavy. This road, however, and this road, they're too thin. They're too thin for a large tank. Only a small tank, such as a small medium tank or a small light tank, would be able to drive on these roads, or a lower tier tank. So what happens is the higher tier tanks would have to stay in the larger roads of the city, and the lower tier tanks would be able to access areas of the town that the big tanks cannot access. Right now, light tanks almost never go inside of cities and towns. But this would allow them to have places where they can sit and hide and have a new type of strategy and new tactics that don't exist currently in the game. For example, if you have a heavy tank on this road over here, a light tank, if it were to hit it, would have to run and hide. And if it ran and hit over here and then into here, the heavy tank would not be able to follow it. It would be too big to follow it. So it allows players to develop new strategies. And this is another example of a road. So the concept is to do this so that players can develop new strategies and new tactics that don't currently exist in the game by changing the width of the area that they're traveling through to only allow certain tanks. Now I'm going to move on to something different. This has to do with the length of a tank. For example, a TOG-2 is a very long tank, and the TOG-2 was designed for trench warfare because they needed to cross trenches, and it's a long tank so that it can cross over the trench without falling into the trench. Now, this terrain feature should be added into the game. However, you want to add it in such a way that if you have the large tank, such as a TOG-2 or the Type 5 Heavy, you have an advantage in the game. Not only can you cross the trench, but it has to give some sort of an advantage, which usually means a time-saving advantage, that you're going to get to a location before the other tanks, because the other tanks can't go through the trench, they have to go around. So in this case, if you have this waterway, and it's too deep for most tanks to cross, however, a large tank is able to get across it, the other tanks have to go around and take the bridge. So, and because there's a mountain over here, the other tanks have to go all the way around. So what happens is it allows new tactics in the game. If you want to cross over this area, you have to have a large tank, and then you have an advantage. If you don't, you have to find another way around. Another aspect is light tanks are a lot faster, and the engines have enough power to make them accelerate and climb up a slope faster and more easily than a large tank. So what you can do is you can add terrain features, such as a river, that cannot be crossed by anybody. However, you add a slope, basically it's a jump or a ramp, And if you have a fast enough tank, you can jump over the river and get to the other side. The only tanks that can cross are the ones that have the speed to make it over safely. So that's a terrain feature that you would add, is basically a ramp to get from one side to the other. Another terrain feature has to do with bridges. Tanks have different sizes. A small tank, such as the ELC, has a low profile, and it can go under low bridges very easily. A larger tank, such as a Type 5 Heavy, would never be able to go under this bridge. It's just too big. So it opens up the door for new tactics. A Type 5 Heavy on one side of the bridge can be attacked by a fast light tank that can go under the bridge, attack the tank, and retreat under the bridge, and the Type 5 Heavy would not be able to chase after it because it can't go under the bridge. And it wouldn't, the way I would make it is I would take all the tanks and find the average height and make a bridge that allows everyone under the average height to go under it, everyone over would not be able to. So you might have a fast medium tank or something like an FCM50T, it's a fast heavy tank, that can't go under the bridge. So if you're chasing after a light tank and he needs to duck for cover, he might run under the bridge and then you're stuck. So like I said, it opens up new tactics in the game by making terrain features that are only applicable, that have advantages based on what tank you have. The last terrain feature is the depth of the water. If the water is deep, you have the average, again, the average height of a tank. And I would make it so that certain tanks, such as the ELC, has a low profile. It can't go a long distance underwater. You can only go for, I believe it's 10 seconds. But if you make the water deep enough to drown an ELC, but not deep enough for a large tank, that means large tanks such as a Type 5 Heavy would be able to drive through these large waterways and have a route and a tactic that they can use that the low profile tanks cannot use. They have to find another way. So these terrain features, I believe, should be added to the game. People might say, oh, well, it's not fair. No, it actually is fair. And the reason why is because in order for the game to be fun, people have to make choices. There has to be problem solving. The more choices that people can make, the more they enjoy the game, because an intelligent person is going to weigh all the different options and all the different choices and choose the best choice. What I am doing is I'm giving the opportunity to give an advantage to a tank, so the person who plays that tank now has an option for new strategies. So they can make new choices in the game. They can choose to go through a path that is specialized for them and not accessible to other tanks, or they can choose the same tactic as everybody else. So that's the reason why. It opens up the freedom and free will and problem solving. It creates new tactics and new strategies, and therefore makes the game more fun. Now, in addition, there are tanks that have the disadvantage. The Type 5 Heavy can't fit through the small roads in the town, so he has to make new choices, because now he knows that his strategy for some tanks are going to work, but now he has to come up with a new strategy to deal with the tanks that fail for his primary strategy. And that's the reason why these tactics should be implemented in the game. If you have any questions or comments, please post below.